Ahora démosle la bienvenida a quien ha sido 4 veces congresista y es teniente coronel de las reservas del Ejército de Estados Unidos. Con ustedes, Tulsi Gabbard.
Aloha. Good evening. Thank you so much for the warm welcome in being here. It's a pleasure. It's my first time here in your beautiful city. And we're gathering here around the most important cause of freedom, something that binds us all together, and something that maybe you, like me and many others, we have taken for granted for too long. But it's not something that we can take for granted anymore because it is our fundamental rights and freedoms that are under attack on almost a daily basis. You know what this means here. We know what this means in our country with what we are going through. We know through the founding of our country how essential freedom it is one of our foundational principles, and it is the heart of any free and thriving democracy, where we can have a truly open marketplace of ideas like we have been having here in the discussions all day today, where we can express our own views, we can take in information from different people who have different experiences and be critical thinkers and draw our own conclusions. That is at the heart of a true and thriving democracy. When we look at how our freedoms are being undermined and why, it's because those in power are terrified of a free people. They're terrified of us actually being able to think for ourselves and make decisions for ourselves. Because we, the people, are the greatest threat to their power and their ability to hold on to power. We've seen different examples of egregious abuse of power, different examples of how those in positions of power in our government try to take our freedom away, but I know for us, I have never seen this more brazen than it is now. It used to be that they would maybe try to do this behind the curtains or behind the scenes, but it's happening now in broad daylight. I have personal experience with this. Quite recent, actually. I first enlisted in the United States Army over 21 years ago, like a lot of Americans, because of the Islamist terrorist attack on our country on that day to go after and defeat those terrorists. I've deployed to war zones in the Middle East and to Africa. During that time, I still currently serve as a lieutenant colonel and a commander. I've put my life on the line to ensure the safety, security, and freedom of our country and our people. So you might imagine the deep sense of betrayal that I felt when just a few weeks ago I learned that I was placed on a secret domestic terror watch list by my own government. By the way, I also served in the United States Congress for 8 years on the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Armed Services Committee, the Homeland Security Committee. I also ran for president in 2020, and yet because I spoke out against Kamala Harris the day after Joe Biden withdrew his candidacy as the Democratic nominee and endorsed Kamala Harris, I went and did an interview and issued a warning to the American people about exactly what kind of president Kamala Harris would be and how dangerous she would be if elected president and commander-in-chief. Because of my speaking out, the very next day, as I was traveling, I was subjected to in-depth searches and every flight thereafter, and it wasn't until some U.S. Air Marshal whistleblowers came forward that I actually understood why. The very next day after I spoke out against Kamala Harris and what kind of president she would be, I was added to a secret terror watch list called Quiet Skies. Political retaliation at its best, and that's why these whistleblowers came forward, because they recognized how wrong this is and how the Harris-Biden administration was brazenly weaponizing our law enforcement through an act of political retaliation, bullying, and harassment. This went on for many, many flights. I've been told I'm still on this secret terror watch list. We're taking legal action against the Harris-Biden administration, but it begs the question, why do they do this? I'm not the first person this has happened to by any means, and as long as they remain in power, I won't be the last one, but why do they do this? They want to send a message to people like me, first of all, saying, don't mess with us or we will mess with you. They want it to have a chilling effect on not only me, but those who see what's going on, to say that you should watch what you say. You should be careful about criticizing the Democrat elite and those in power. Because if you do that, if you challenge their authority, then you too will potentially be subject to that political retaliation. And that's really what's on the line in this election coming before us. Obviously, Democratic nominee, as of a couple of days ago officially, is Kamala Harris, somebody who's never won a single presidential vote, not in 2020 and not in 2024 at this point, not a single electoral vote, not a single primary election vote. And yet she is coasted directly to being the Democratic nominee, working with her friends in the propaganda media and in big tech, all working to try to hide the truth about who she is and what she stands for and the disastrous record that she has had. Now, over and over at the convention, in her speech, she talked about freedom. She talked about how she will be the president who will defend our freedom, and she will provide a future that is truly free and safe and prosperous. I almost fell out of my seat when I heard her saying this, and it reminded me of the saying, "Beware of the wolf in sheep's clothing." Her words mean nothing. Her actions and her record tell the whole story. As vice president, she was tasked with securing our borders. Over the last 3.5 years, we have seen unprecedented numbers of illegal immigrants from all over the world crossing our borders. As Senator Kamala Harris showed, she does not believe in freedom of religion. She opposed a judge who was nominated by President Trump for one reason and one reason alone. He's a devout Catholic. She says she stands for freedom of speech, but has shown us time and time again, not only against me, but against Donald Trump and many others who have dared to challenge her power, that she will not hesitate to weaponize our law enforcement, our national security agencies, the IRS, and any agency that she has at her fingertips against her political opponents. We saw what they have done to Donald Trump, trying their very best to lock him up in prison. They tried to remove him from the ballot in over 32 states to make it so that voters didn't even have the opportunity to vote for him. And recently, most egregiously, they denied multiple requests for additional Secret Service protection to deal with the threats that he faced, which resulted in a very near miss of an assassination attempt on his life. We have to remain vigilant because they are using every tool available to them against us. And we have to remain vigilant, looking at their words, not their actions, because they claim to be defenders of freedom, and yet they are taking our freedom away. They claim to be defenders of democracy, and yet they take our democracy away and are undermining our basic fundamental rights in a democratic society. They claim to be upholding the rule of law, and yet they are weaponizing our justice system. They claim to want to unite our country, and yet from day one in the Harris-Biden administration, they have been tearing our country apart. on the basis of race, on the basis of politics, on the basis of religion. They claim to stand for peace and diplomacy. And yet we are now on the brink of multiple regime change wars, World War III, and nuclear war under this administration. Now, I was a Democrat for over 20 years, and these are some of the main reasons why I left the Democratic Party. It is under the complete control of this elitist cabal of woke warmongers who are doing all they can to divide us, to destroy our Constitution, and to take away our God-given freedoms. That is the truth and the reality that we face, sadly. But that leads us to our call to action, our opportunity, because the power is in the hands of the people. It is up to us to reject these self-serving, corrupt politicians who reject freedom, because they cannot be trusted to defend our freedom. We see this at dictators and authoritarian leaders around the world. They weaponize public institutions because they're terrified of a free people. They know that when we use our power, when we lift our voices, when we speak the truth and make sure that we are heard, then we expose their lies and threaten their ability to stay in power. The focus of this conference is freedom fighters. That is the thing that unites us. We will have disagreements on some issues, maybe many issues, but fundamentally, if we do not have the freedom to speak freely, to stand up in this marketplace of ideas, then we won't have the freedom to debate, to agree, or to disagree. And that's what's at stake today. We have the opportunity to bring about serious change, certainly in our election, but even between these elections, the defense of freedom is an ongoing effort and an ongoing fight where we must stand strong if we hope to have a free and peaceful and prosperous society for our kids and generations to come. We are the only ones who can hold our leaders accountable. That even in the most hopeless and dark of times, we have to keep that flame of freedom alive in our hearts, knowing that it's worth the fight, not only for today, but for tomorrow, and for those who will come after us. It's worth it. And I will close with the most powerful truth that will give us that inspiration on those days when we may feel tired and we may be questioning, is it worth the fight? It is worth the fight. Por la gracia de Dios somos libres y lucharemos para seguir siendo libres. Unamos fuerzas y luchemos por la fe, la familia y la libertad. Gracias, México. Que Dios te bendiga. Aloha. Thank you so much.